I took the live-in job because my London rent swallowed 2 paychecks a month and because Mr. Latimer's advert sounded straightforward. Overnight companion for elderly gentlemen. North Yorkshire Dales. Private room, full board. £550 per week. The agency warned the manor sat miles from a village and required night security checks. But I'd done hospice shifts uglier than darkness. My references cleared Thursday. By Sunday, I was on a rattling northern train watching moors smear past rain-slick windows. Stone ash house perched at the end of a beachland drive, all slit black eaves and one sagging greenhouse. Elsie, the housekeeper, met me with a handshake like cold rope and a single rule delivered before she'd taken my coat. Mr. Latimer's door stays closed after 9. If you hear knocking, don't open to anyone except me. She gave no reason, only pressed a brass key into my palm and pointed to a service staircase, smelling of coal dust. My attic room was neat iron bed, writing desk, kettle, but the window latch rattled in the wind like teeth in a mug. Mr. Latimer himself, 84. Thin as a willow switch, was polite in the nervous way widowers can be. Parkinson's made his teacup tremor. I studied saucer and listened to stories of the wool trade and RAF sirens. But as dust soaked the mullion panes, he grew jittery. At 8:45, he squeezed my wrist hard for such brittle fingers and whispered, "Don't let the girl in. Every night she tries." Lax mind locks. His pupils shrank to pinheads. I thought dementia. I'd heard worse from patients begging invisible spouses. I promised to keep watch. Stone ash settled into a hush, broken only by beams creaking. Elsie retired to the carriage cottage by 9:30, leaving me sole sentinel. I toured bedrooms, checked sash windows, slid the old brass bolts home. At 10 the wind died, and the house inhaled a silence so thick my ears rang. I brewed chamomile in the kitchen scullery, and had just opened my notebook when footsteps tapped outside Mr. Latimer's room bare feet on stone tiles. Not Elsie's shuffling slippers, childlike padding toward the latch. I flicked hall lamp on. Nothing. Door remained shut. I chalked it to timber contracting and took the first shift armchair beside his door. By 2 I'd nodded off. Morning held no sign of intruder. Still, Mr. Latimer gripped my arm at breakfast, eyes wet, and croaked, "You heard her." I admitted footsteps. He exhaled relief, then spoke no more until noon. Day 2 repeated. Calm daylight, twilight jitters. Please. That night I placed a bell on the hall table and tied fishing line from knob to clapper, noisy but harmless. At 11:17, the bell rattled once. Sharp. My torch lit only empty corridor. Bell rang, but no thief. Mr. Latimer's doorknob twitched under unseen weight, then stilled. I slipped the bolt chain into bracket for extra measure. By dawn, unease replaced skepticism. Elsie found me making a floor plan over toast crumbs. She sighed like a nurse losing patience with a toddler. "You've a right to know," she said, wiping hands on apron. Mr. Latimer's son, Robert, married a girl from Leeds 12 years back. Quiet thing, pregnant quick. 6 months along she vanished. Police spent weeks, river searches, dogs, nothing. Robert drank himself off a cliff after the inquest. Mr. Latimer believes she wanders these halls every night. Still trying to come home. She folded towel as though laundry filed grief. "I don't believe ghosts," she added. "But Mr. Latimer's banking deeds leave him ripe pickings. I fear someone's milking legend." That afternoon I walked perimeter. Garden walls met pasture and crumbling mortar. Only one breach, a loose barred gate facing a forestry track. Fresh boot ruts stitched the mud. I followed them to a line of spruce, finding cigarette butts and an empty, crisp packet. Not proof, but someone watched the house. I returned before dusk, dragging the greenhouse ladder inside to wedge under hall latch. Mr. Latimer praised the brace, but panic still pinched his face at 8:50. She'll come earlier once she knows you rekeen, I assured him I'd sit through. At 10:20, a metallic ping echoed from kitchen window latch. I left ladder brace door, crept past pantry. Moonlight cut slats across floor. The casement above sink hung ajar, latch filed through. I stepped back, but a figure lunged, knocking torch from hand. Tall, wool cap, builder's gloves. We grappled against butcher's block. His knee hit ribs, airing lungs. I grabbed kettle cord, swung plug like flail, catching his temple. He cursed, accent local, stumbled. I hurled the iron pot, clanging on shoulder. He fled corridored. As he sprinted, boards near Mr. Latimer's room creaked. A second shape, smaller, darted from steady doorway, skirts brushing floorboards. She whispered, "Come on." Voice adult, but pitch child soft. They collided with greenhouse ladder brace. Wood splintered, chain snapped, door swung inward. Mr. Latimer screamed. I barreled behind, ribs on fire. In lamplight I saw the truth. The girl was no specter woman, mid-20s, pregnancy showing. The man shoved her inside, shouting, "Grab the deeds and the key." She wept, not with him here. He cursed, aimed torch beam at Mr. Latimer's gnarled hands clutching a small oak chest. The man yanked chest. Old fingers held. Skin split. I charged, chair raised overhead. So did courage borrowed from memories of dad holding a mule's reins. Chair crashed into man's back. Chest dropped. Brass key clattered. Pregnant woman shrieked, hands shielding belly. Man swung elbow, cracking my lip. I rammed shoulder, forced him into wardrobe, wedged chair against handles. Turning, I saw a woman kneel by Mr. Latimer, sobbing, "Granddad, I'm sorry." He said you'd forgive me if I asked in person. Mr. Latimer stroked her hair with shaking hand. "Rebecca, my love," he said, voice thin, tears cratered powdered cheeks. The legend folded into flesh. Missing bride returned. Used unborn child as bargaining chip, but boyfriend twisted plan into burglary. Police from Thirsk arrived 40 minutes later after Elsie's frantic 999. They hauled the man Dean Hartley, local handyman with burglary priors, out the wardrobe, chair splinters still embedded in coat. Rebecca Latimer confessed. Fear of father-in-law's disapproval had driven her away years prior. Debt and Dean's coercion warped reconciliation into heist. Dean had studied estate plans while patching garden wall, learning Mr. Latimer slept lightly and prized the chest inside. Not jewels, but Robert's suicide note and the unborn child's sonogram Dad never saw. Mr. Latimer declined pressing charges on Rebecca, insisting grandchild's safety mattered more than locks. Police agreed to caution, citing coercion and pregnancy. Dean faced burglary and assault charges. A week later, I wheeled Mr. Latimer onto the terrace at dusk. Rebecca sat beside, hand resting on her bump. No knocking disturbed hallway, only wind-combing chimney. Mr. Latimer pressed the oak chest into her lap and whispered, "No more ghosts, Bex." I resigned the post after arranging live-out carers. My ribs still ribbing when I laughed. Stone ash feels less haunted. Brass key now hangs inside door, not outside. Sometimes night creaks are just tired planks, but sometimes they were footsteps of someone who let shame grow fangs. Grandpa knew the difference and begged a stranger to hold the door. I listened, and the girl finally walked in at the right hour, not as legend, but as blood. I hadn't felt the sulfur sting of Yellowstone. Upper Geyser Basin, since the summer of '97, when Dad let me carry our aluminum. Thermos down the boardwalk and warned that steam burns faster than fire. The park closed a week later for repairs. Dad's new job dragged us to Missouri. and the memory shrank to a postcard I kept inside an algebra book. Last month, a client workshop in Bozeman ended early, leaving me a rental Subaru, 3 nervous hours of daylight, and a child-sized promise I'd never quite broken. Watch Old Faithful one more time, just once, before grown-up noise drowned the chance forever. April's snow still ringed the Madison like a coffee stain when I reached the lot. The shuttle buses were gone for the season. Only 3 cars and a Ranger truck sat under a sky the color of nickel. Everything else felt unchanged. Dragon breath drifting across the path, the spongy thunk of rubber planks over permafrost, and that deep kettle drum rumble under my boots. I shot 2 rolls of film. Dad swore nothing digital captured steam, right? Then drifted past the rebuilt visitor center toward the service sheds behind Old Faithful Inn. A sign I didn't remember leaned against a cedar post. Twilight Basin Walk Ranger led. Group of 8, free. Sign up at shed 4 by 6 p.m. The sheet looked hand-laminated, the ink slightly bled. Dad always wanted that tour, but shifts never lined up. My watch read 5:42. Shed 4 squatted behind a snowblower garage. A young ranger in worn canvas named Taika J. Checked a clipboard, smiled when she saw me alone, and said, "Perfect, you're number 8. Her partner, a thick-shouldered man called Holt, nodded without looking up from a bucket of padlocks. Becca passed out battered carbide, headlamps, museum pieces, no batteries. Tiny flame fed by water dripped onto rock dust. "Phone stay here," she said. Light from screen spooks the elk. We slid devices into a metal locker. Holt locked it and slipped the key into a breast pocket. Nothing digital, just soft lantern light and crunching snow, exactly the nostalgia I'd driven for. Our group shuffled behind Becca across the empty boardwalk. Old Faithful boomed its scheduled salute at 6:19. Tourists on the rim cheered, but soon the basin hushed. Becca turned left onto a roped-off spur marked research only and told us the trail was normally closed because of fragile crust, but cold weather let the soil hold weight. Frost crackled beneath boots. Warm vapor drifted like lazy ghosts through lodgepole shadows. Half a mile in, Holt unhooked a dangling chain and ushered us into a gully flanked by cinder walls. At the throat stood a wooden shed, doors split and leaning. "Old mineral test cabin," Becca said. "Safe enough for a 5-minute warm-up." Inside, the single room reeked of rust and ash. A potbelly stove squatted in one corner. Holt struck a wooden match, fed kindling, coaxed a thin flame. Becca asked us to circle the stove, hush, and listen for the keeper's gap, a legend I'd never heard. She spoke softly. In the 1930s, a night watchman named Morris Ray supposedly timed eruptions by year. One winter, a sudden hush, no steam, no wind pulled him past the basin rim. He vanished, but old rangers claimed you can still hear his walking stick tapping if the geysers all fall silent together. The stove ticked. Wind whined somewhere in vent pipes. My pulse slowed, lulled by crackle and story. Then a hinge shrieked. Holt had closed the sagging doors and slid a plank across the latch. The headlamps guttered together as if kissed by a draft. Darkness smothered the room. Only ember glow painted silhouettes. Someone laughed nervously, unsure if this was brand-safe Ranger theater. Holt's boots thudded behind us. Metal rasped, maybe a crowbar. The laugh died. "Pockets on the table," he said, voice flat, Eastern Montana drawl minimized. Cash, rings, watches, no tech mention. They'd locked phones away already. The Pasadena tourist in front of me sputtered that this had to be a joke. Holt smashed the crowbar into the stove's iron lip. Spark spat. This is the only warning. Becca struck another match, lit a kerosene lantern, and looked nothing like the bright ranger from Shed 4 face, cold, businesslike. She opened a canvas duffel. Its mouth gaped with wallets and camera straps already lifted from earlier groups. 5 minutes, she told Holt. Shock froze everyone. The Idaho school teacher complied first, dropping a leather billfold onto a crate. Others followed. When Holt neared me, I felt the pocket knife Dad gave me years back. A 2-inch whittler. I towed it on flights until TS existed. Press against thigh. I raised hands, pretended fumble with jacket zipper, then let the knife tumble unseen into my sleeve. Holt shoved a burlap sack under my nose. Heat from stove, flushed sweat onto collarbone. I emptied wallet, maybe $60, and slipped knife into the sack's fold. Holt didn't notice. Becca kept count. 2 wallets short. Holt grunted, yanked Pasadena man by collar. Frog marched him into Lantern Slice. Pasadena claimed he'd left cash at hotel. Holt lifted crowbar again. The entire basin outside inhaled steam vents, sighed into sudden stillness. True hush, unnatural after constant grumble. Even the stove draft stilled. Holt paused mid-swing, like hearing something deeper. Becca's pupils dilated. Superstitious. She hushed him, listening. I seized the silence. Flicked sleeve, caught knife handle, lunged. Tip found burlap seam. Slash spilled wallets and my tiny blade nicked Holt's forearm. He roared, swung crowbar wide. It rang off potbelly iron, shaking embers. Sparks flared bright enough to blind momentarily. Pasadena man dove, shoulder rammed Holt's knees. I grabbed hot poker from stove door, burned palm, but adrenaline numbed sting. I jabbed the cherry red tip toward Becca's lantern. Glass burst, kerosene whooshed across floorboards. Flame chase split oil under duffel. Becca shrieked, tried stomping fire. Sparks reached burlap, igniting fringes. Smoke thickened. Cedar roof croaked. Holt kicked Pasadena aside, clawed for crowbar, but heat shoved both thieves toward doorway. They fumbled plank latch. It jammed from swelling wood. Idaho teacher body checked along with me. Latch splintered outward. Frigid twilight poured in, dragging smoke. We stumbled onto crust that hissed under sudden weight. Holt and Becca bolted up slope toward boardwalk. Duffel half aflame, wallets scattering like burnt leaves. I heard a group opposite, down gully to main trail. Geysers regained voice. Deep humph of Castle Geyser starting a minor eruption, steam jetting skyward. Keeper's Gap over. 5 minutes later, we flagged a night patrol ranger skimming snow on snowmobile. He radioed law enforcement and fire crew. Flames in the test cabin dimmed quick. They said only floor charred. Sheriff deputies cornered Holt and Becca near the parking loop, still stinking of kerosene. Duffel recovered. 15 wallets, 4 wedding rings, a Leica, a Ziploc of souvenir quarters. FBI later said the pair were seasonal contractors who'd memorized evening patrol gaps. No tech, no jammers, just borrowed uniforms, plywood props, and a tale about Morris Ray to lure nostalgia chasers. 3 nights prior, they'd emptied $8,000 from elderly hikers who drove home before realizing. By dawn, MPS changed Shed 4, pulled flyers, and posted signs. No Twilight tours operate in Winter Report solicitors. My stolen $60 returned, soot-smudged. The park medic smeared aloe on my palm, said the burn would fade, but maybe not the lesson. I drove toward Bozeman under cotton candy sunrise, Dad's pocket knife on the dashboard beside the warped copper flyer. Steam ghosts curled in the rear view, but the basin rumbled steady again. I'd leave it to the rangers and the real geysers. Nostalgia is safest when daylight and posted trail maps keep legends from setting traps in the hush between eruptions. I hadn't stood beside Niagara Falls since the summer of '98. When Dad hoisted me onto a rail by the Maid of the Mist dock and swore the water sounded like 100 subway trains at once. 2 months after that day, he died of an aneurysm. Mom moved us inland, and the thundering river became a postcard I kept buried in a dresser. 27 years later, a work trip dropped me in Buffalo with a half-empty tank, an idle Thursday evening, and a tug in my chest that said one detour couldn't hurt. The tourist complex had sprouted glass and neon, but the first glimpse of rushing white erased every upgrade. Spray drifted over the rail, cold and stinging. I shot 3 bracketed photos, pocketed the camera, and nearly walked back to the parking lot until a curl of damp papers slapped my shoe. Dark green cardstock, thicker than a brochure, embossed with a white spiral that looked suspiciously like the Niagara whirlpool from above. Chiseled letters read, "Lantern walk one night, only explore the old power tunnel via the Shokoff Ruin Spaces Limited, 10 cost. Free sunset departure. No QR codes. No websites, just a note to meet the keeper at 7 p.m. beside the ruined elevator shaft below the gorge trail." I'd heard scattered campfire rumors about a caretaker who vanished during the 1956 rock slide. A lantern supposedly still seen bobbing in the mist. Dad loved telling those scraps. For a second, it felt like he'd nudged that flyer against my foot. Curiosity outweighed caution. Sunset at 6:46 gave me half an hour to grab coffee and hike the switchbacks. By 6:55, I reached the chain-link gate that blocks off the old hydro plant debris. 9 other people lingered. An Ohio couple in matching parkas, 2 Erasmus students with point and shoots, a local podcast host chasing spooky stories, and a wiry man who kept rubbing his sleeve over a cheap wristwatch. A slim woman in a faded NY State Parks jacket arrived, lantern in one hand, brass key ring in the other. "I'm Clara," she said, voice hoarse as gravel. "Last caretaker's grandniece. Tonight's your only peek before they concrete this tunnel forever." Her badge had the park arrowhead, but the backing looked homemade. She unlocked the gate and asked us to douse phones and flashlights. White light wrecks the old bat's eyes. No one argued. Dusk swallowed the gorge so fast the rule made sense. Clara led single file past broken turbines and weeds taller than the rail. 20 yards in, a stone arch yawned the entrance to a service shaft I'd never noticed. She dropped a lantern to half-mast, painting walls in orange. We ducked inside. The floor sloped gently and smelled of wet pennies. About 50 paces later, she stopped at a wooden hatch. "Once we're past this, keep right. Left drift's collapsed." She lifted the bar. Hinges wheezed. Beyond lay a narrow tunnel shored by century-old timbers. Ankle-deep water rivulets threading between our boots. Inside the hatch, Clara set the lantern on a crate and produced a coil of thin rope. "Just a safety line," she said, looping it through the handle and across the passage, so no one stumbled back out by mistake. It felt unnecessary, but old shafts do eat the careless. She asked us to gather round the lantern while she told the legend in full. Story went that her great-uncle nicknamed the keeper patrol bees, tunnels with a pocket watch and a cudgel for trespassers. On the night of the slide, he'd stayed behind to secure valves. Rescue crews later found the watch, but never his body. Locals claimed if the river briefly hushed, you could hear his stick tapping in the dark. When she finished, Clara lifted the lantern to shoulder height, winked, and blew out the flame. Total black swallowed everything. Even the Ohio wife's LED watch face had been covered by sleeve. The silence after the hiss of flame retreat was enormous. My breath sounded like a stranger's, then barely audible. Single tap echoed from farther down tunnel. Another. 2 more. Hollow wood on stone. Pace steady. Someone whispered, "Nope." Voice brittle. Ohio husband squeezed my shoulder in the dark and muttered, "Board settling." Clara's voice drifted from somewhere ahead, not beside us now. Keeper's still counting time. Her tone had shifted, playful veneer gone. That's when instinct yanked alert. Lantern on floor, rope across passage. Guy no longer near group. The tapping wasn't myth. It was a person advancing. I sank to one knee, felt along tunnel wall until fingers brushed a stack of old wooden planks, support scraps maybe. I lifted one, gauged weight, whispered to the podcast host what was happening. The Erasmus girl began to sob, softly. Another tap closer. A shuffle of boots in shallow water. A hooded figure broke the darkness silhouette darker than black, handheld lantern, unlit. He stopped 2 steps from the crate, bent to pick it up. I swung the plank. Wood met shoulder with a crack louder than I expected. Lantern clattered. Figure swore, male voice, not Clara. Chaos erupted. Ohio husband tackled him. Erasmus students yanked rope loose. I fumbled for a matchbook Dad's Polaroid lives inside habit from camping. 1 strike, yellow flare spilled light. The man on floor wore a thrift store duster, ski mask rolled to chin. No park insignia. The crate lid lay open, revealing wallets, phones, and the woman's badge tossed on top. She collected everything into safekeeping while our eyes adjusted to black. Footsteps splashed behind. Clara's silhouette sprinted deeper into tunnel. Without light, her lead was seconds. Ohio wife grabbed the fallen lantern, thumbed wheel, flame jumped after 2 tries. We followed the wet footprints until tunnel splintered into a ladder shaft with daylight seeping down. Clara struggled with a rusted grate overhead. The podcast host shouted, "Rangers," loud enough to bounce off walls. Startled, ankle twisting. Ohio husband and I wrestled her down the ladder. She pulled a folding knife, nicked my forearm before Erasmus guy kicked it away. We held her until 2 genuine rangers, drawn by the shout, thundered down from the ruins path. Turns out Clara and the masked man were drifters camping in the disused quarry above the gorge. They'd photocopied a volunteer's badge, laminated it, and printed flyers on the library's color printer. Every few evenings, they lured sunset stragglers into the shaft, killed the lights, and used simple sleight to empty pockets rope across exit. Stage taps for distraction, getaway through the ladder up top. No chips, no scatters, just old school darkness and fear. Rangers hauled them off. The rest of us climbed back into a sky now lilac blue and ringed by gulls. The Ohio couple treated my cut with a Band-Aid. The podcast host recorded debrief for her episode. I drove to Buffalo with Dad's Polaroid on the dashboard, the matchbook now a little lighter, and a plank splinter wedged in coat pocket. Next nostalgia trip, I'll stick to daylight overlooks and printed schedules, because sometimes the only thing inside a childhood legend is 2 desperate thieves who know how silence makes people stand still.